Hello, I'm Matt, and this is Full Send Engineering, episode number 8. Today we've got a very special guest, Pamela Naidoo-Ameglio. Now, Pam, you've come across some of the most dangerous and some of the most insane conditions working underground in places like South Africa, in Australia, in what is some of the most high pressure and high stakes environments that this world can throw at you. Now, you've been classically trained as a geologist. You've learned how to read the rock. You know, let's say, probably in some of the most deepest mines that the world can throw at you. And you've really got a knack for connecting with people on the ground, the people that are actually doing the work and the people that are actually getting things done. Later on in your career, you seem to find some of the most high-pressure, high-stakes leadership environments too. In the preparation for this catch-up, Pamela was actually telling me a story about how she had to go into a negotiation on salary and wages for some of the workers, where just the previous year, these miners had taken the entire management team and held them hostage underground.
Yep.
And here you are putting your hand up to go and negotiate in these situations. I think it's really telling of the type of person that you are. And then even later in your career, you've been elected as a general executive on the ANSTO nuclear reactor. Someone with seemingly no nuclear experience, and you still find a way to put your hand up and go and manage and work out a way to connect with people and build credibility when you yourself are still learning. It's something we're going to get into a little bit later. I'm so excited to have you on the show, Pam. It's something that I've been interested in for a while, and you're actually the first non-engineer. You're the first scientist to come on Full Send Engineering. And as soon as I heard your story, I was like, we've got to get Pamela in to talk. So welcome to Full Send Engineering.
Thank you, Matt. It's really an honor to be the first scientist here in the room. Wow. Leading the way, which, as Matt has pointed out, has been a theme of my career all along. Being a scientist means that you're curious about everything. And I'm also very driven to learn and to challenge myself. And I think those themes in my life have led to some of these experiences that you've outlined, Matt. And happy to go, talk about some of those.
Hey, let's jump straight in. And I wanted to start with a little bit of a personal question, actually. I kind of wanted to ask you, was there ever a moment in your career where you said to yourself, hey, maybe I'm not cut out for this?
Actually, Matt, a lot of times. It's something I have had to deal with throughout my career, this little voice in the back of my mind saying, can I do this? What do I know about this role? Am I going to be good enough to do this? And believe it or not, it still happens, even though I've been in this career for many, many years. And I think it's part of, my psychological setup. And I found out that it's something a lot of women share. We are actually very uncertain of ourselves and what we are able to do. And that comes from a number of factors, conditions growing up, stereotyping of women in the workplace and of different industries. But most importantly, I realized it's not real. It is all in my head. And if I can overcome that, then I could achieve a lot of things that I dream of doing. And so it's always a battle, but for me, it's one of those challenges I take on and feel a real sense of achievement when I overcome it and prove to myself, yet again, that actually I can do this.
It's so fascinating because even one of my mentors that I speak to quite regularly, they said to me, Matt, no one else can hear the voice that's in your mind,
Yes.
So, and I find myself sometimes, like obviously coming into new careers or new jobs, like you really have this like kind of like doubt that kind of fills your internal chatter. And it's good to hear that other people have that too.
Yes, it's It's all about overcoming that and remembering who you are and what you've done already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I wanted to kind of step back right to the beginning.
Yes.
Right? Back to maybe when you were young, you had a fascination for dinosaurs and rocks.
Which
And,
kids doesn't?
well, I think normally the thing is kids grow out of that. But
Yeah.
you've sent to like, make that into like a full-blown career. Like, where did it all start? Tell us, take us back.
So it was definitely the rocks. Growing up where I did in KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa, I lived on the side of a hill which had a lovely shale bank.
Okay.
And drove my mum crazy trying to climb up this as a baby and, later on chewing it as you do.
Yeah, rock liquor.
Really good talents for geology as it turns out. And from there, that interest in science and dinosaurs and gemstones and, why is this rock the way it is? I actually was quite good in science and arts in school. And it was reading a novel about manganese nodules by a geologist who was exploring in the sea that actually thought, turned on a light. Geology is a thing. I could do this.
No way.
Yeah. And no one at my high school had heard about geology as a career. It was not a traditional career for my cultural heritage, even though I was growing up in South Africa with its huge mining industry. I was a woman. Women were not allowed to work on mines. So there were a number of reasons why it was off the radar. But, adventurer me was, convinced I want to be a scientist, but specifically I want to be a geologist because it will take me around the world and I could learn about all of these rock types, minerals to my heart's content.
Gosh.
Yeah.
So, normally people are born into a family of geologists.
Yes.
That wasn't the case for you. You kind of found your own path. And where does it come from? Where does this ability to just be like, hey, I want to become a geologist? Surely that was something that was instilled to you from a young age.
I was so fortunate. My parents were really keen for us to learn and explore and gave us a lot of leeway to choose what we wanted to do, which was not quite the norm at the time.
Really?
And the other aspect was the reading. I mentioned the novel and reading opened up all of these worlds to me that were not in my immediate sphere. So understanding that having an education and having a career that would allow me to travel would unlock all of those worlds is what motivated me.
Wow. I think because geologists and mining professionals, you end up having to move around a fair bit.
Yes.
And it's kind of like part of the parcel, it's kind of how it is.
I think many people don't realize that at first,
and
but
often
it was one of the things that attracted me to
it.
it.
I can imagine. And often, you're moving to quite remote places and I know early in your career you came across some really challenging situations where you were learning how to read rock and going in after some really intense things. Can you tell us maybe some of the stories from your early career?
Yeah. So my baptism underground at first was as a geology student. In my first year of vacation work, my first underground visit was to one of the deep gold mines on the South African Witwatersrand. So you've got a picture going down in a vertical cage about 2.5 kilometers from the surface. Firstly, it's hot, it's humid because water is being used to flush the faces and keep things cool. It's noisy because there's a lot of drilling going on, but also it's a bit eerie because there's this cracking of rock that you can hear constantly. People are scaling down faces, there's a conveyor moving rock. So a lot of things to take in. But what stood out was I didn't like the sharp rocks and it was too humid. So I thought, no, I am not going to work on a deep gold mine in South Africa. I will find other mines to work on. And sure enough, I did. I started working in manganese and in the Kalahari Basin in a place called Hotazel. And yes, it was named that for a reason, middle of the desert. And that was the conventional mining there was both open pit and underground. And these were board and pillar mining, which means leaving large pillars behind because you've got these tabular bodies and extracting large rooms of ore, which works really well when you've got, a reasonably thick ore body. So that was my first year. But on the very first day of my second year in mining, I had started working on a chrome mine, and I had to go and map the site of a fatality that had happened overnight.
Wow.
Now, in these chrome deposits that are also fairly flat-lying, and this was in the bushveld of South Africa, there's also a lot of low-lying structures, angular faults, but at a very low angle, which means you don't see them easily. And where they intersect those flat-lying layers of rock, you can create a situation where a slab will fall down because it's a dome feature. And I'd understood about structural geology, of course, in my training and in the previous work, but it was really something that came home to me when having to go underground and knowing that someone had died there last night doing their job of scaling down because a large piece of rock had fallen on them, which we'd missed in the scaling because people hadn't seen that structure. Yeah. And I thought, oh my goodness, as a geologist, it's my job to make sure I am mapping those structures and giving that information to the miners so that we don't have these fatalities again. And I suppose it could have been a point where knowing that mining was such a dangerous job that I wouldn't want to do it, but it actually had the opposite effect. It spurred me on to want to work in underground mines more than in open pit mines.
What do you think it was that spurred you on? Because I know, having worked through some incidents and having worked through some pretty pressured situations, I feel like that some of these situations can really be kind of go or no. But what was it from that situation where that really kind of sparked your interest and made you even feel more motivated?
Yeah. It was a realization that with my training, I was equipped to be able to prevent this happening. I could use my skills as a geologist to keep people safe.
So maybe for someone that doesn't understand geology and hasn't kind of stood under some of these features, could you maybe describe how you would kind of do that, how you would interpret the rock and how the features kind of create that zone of weakness that end up being a plane to fall out?
Sure. So if you imagine you had a layered cake, and this is your ore body that's more or less lying flat, maybe at a very slight incline. And then if you imagine that you were going to slice through it, but instead of slicing it vertically, as you would slice a cake, and vertical faults are the easy ones to find because you can see the displacement that they make, you're going to cut it almost parallel to the layers of your cake, more like you're going to be, peeling a fruit or something that shallow. And those are difficult to see because they are almost parallel to the layers. So as a geologist, you're actually looking for the indications of the fracturing or the faulting, which we are trained to see. It's different types of mineralization. It's indicators of movement on a plane. And the tricky thing about being in an underground environment is each blast, there's a lot of dust. So someone has to go down and wash the face. And that same person is usually doing the scaling. So that is before you could see where the danger is. Now, where a geologist comes in is we project those structures that we see in a three-dimensional environment. So we can predict where these shallow features are going to be from what we've seen before and what we know in our geological model we could expect ahead. And that ability to predict is something that I think is really useful in the mining world.
And makes the environment much safer.
Definitely.
So you described these open kind of rooms. Tell us what it's like to walk into one of these rooms. And I guess the perspective, I recently made the change from working in, well, not recently, through my career, made the change from working in mining to working in tunneling and working in high factors of safety. And I know in these rooms that you're describing, they're very much a temporary structure. What's that like? Tell us, put us in your shoes. You're a young geologist walking into these massive rooms. What's that feeling like?
So firstly, it's dark. If you don't have your headlamp and you don't have your map and understand, the orientation of things, you can easily get lost.
Oh gosh, so scary.
So I'm fortunate. I have a really good sense of direction. I know how to read a map. So it was usually not that scary. But interestingly, as mines progress the mining, the pillars tend to reduce in size. When it's mined out, so you can get the highest recovery, and will eventually collapse to a very, down to closing completely. So in room and pillars, they tend to be pretty stable and long-lived. But I'd also worked in conventional stoping where for narrow mined reefs, like the chrome mines and later on in platinum, and which is very much the norm for the gold mining in South Africa, narrow mine reefs mean you are removing a meter or less than a meter of ore-rich rock, and you are actually then supporting that void with wooden pillars or piles of pillars.
Wow.
And those actually collapse at a much greater rate. So it's interesting. You've got to be aware of where you are, because you don't want to go into one of these stopes that's collapsing or that's too narrow. You've got to be aware where the blasting is going to be taking place, because you don't want to go into those rooms. You don't want to get in the way or accidentally, cause some issue. And you also need to be aware of where the vehicles are going to be moving, because, as I say, it's dark. In manganese and coal mines, there's really not much that you can see, because the light doesn't reflect off surfaces. It's absorbed.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. So understanding where you are is really important. And when you see in certain mines, they have whitewashing up to a certain level, the grade line, that is to improve the visibility of things and not only to make sure that you've got a safe fitting.
Wow. So, hey, what does whitewashing mean?
When the walls of the pillars or the rooms or traveling ways and tunnels are actually lime washed or covered in paint up to a certain height.
So where you've got permanent support above you.
Yes. And more importantly, can orientate yourself as well, because that's what you would find all the directions or the naming of the stopes and travel ways.
Because this is something, because you described the sound of being underground, and I think maybe you can describe it in really simpleton terms of what it actually sounds like. Because from my experience in mining, say, previously I was working in a sandstone, in the Sydney sandstone plateau or body, some of ore body, but yeah. And, if I held two pieces of sandstone together and whacked them together, but sandstone's like 50 megapascals, but some of these deep mines, you're probably in the 300 megapascal range.
Yeah.
Describe the kind of the sound to us.
So those deep South African gold mines and the deep platinum mines, they have those very hard, strong rock. And when those break or are rattling together, the sound is really, it's high-pitched. It's like when you hear gravel crunching underfoot, but you're amplifying that frequency many, many times. It's very sharp and crackling, I think, is the best
Yeah.
way to
It's like
describe
a
it.
firecracker.
Yeah. But, besides the sound of the rock, I think people are curious about what the sound of drilling underground is like.
Yeah.
And for anyone who's worked underground, you know that it's quite deafening.
Yeah.
I would say I realized for the first time why people are put off by MRIs. Because when I had my first MRI, I was put into this little tunnel and there was all of this noise. And I thought, that's like drilling underground. This is totally normal for me. But I know that some people freak out when they
Hate it.
hear the MRI sound.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, this is what it sounds like if you heard drilling underground.
Wow. Okay. So we'll go get an MRI and can simulate what it sounds like.
Yep.
It sounds like you've worked across so many different types of mining, but one of the ones I was really interested to talk to you about was diamond mining.
Yeah. Okay.
Because for anyone that's, any people out there that have had to propose to their partner, they've got interested in diamonds. And I just kind of imagine, I can't imagine what it's like to get to a face of diamonds and to be, mapping the face and for there to be, can you just see the diamond in the face? Like, what's it like?
I wish. No, unfortunately not. So diamonds are a type of mineral that's actually quite low in quantity within the rock type that you find it. So, in mining terms, low grade, but it is a high value commodity. And so the first diamond mine I worked on was actually De Beers' lowest grade diamond mine. We're talking about 4 to 8 carats per 100 tons.
Wow.
And a carat is 0.2 of a gram. So when you
Jesus.
think about this, 100 tons would only hold a few grams of diamonds. So no, you don't see them underground because they are covered in other rock. And it's very rare that the mining process, which was block caving, would actually uncover or release diamonds during the process of mining. You'd have to go through the process of crushing and screening to remove the rock that was around the diamonds to unlock the diamond. And I was fortunate to be able to see these diamonds in the sorting house, because the last step in the diamond beneficiation process was having the diamonds come through a sorting system where, and this was my first encounter with technology, these pneumatic jets would shoot out the diamonds from the other rock, which were all, similar
cool.
size. And so you had the diamonds being separated from the rock. But also, it was an amazing privilege as a geologist to actually see these beautiful diamonds in the rough. Now, the mine was Koffiefontein, and it is known for having 1 carat diamonds that have a perfectly octahedral structure.
Okay.
So they're not, when you look at them, they don't look as if they're rough diamonds because they've maintained a lot of their
structure.
faceting and structure. Yeah. So very uncommon. And that was the reason why the mine still continued, even though it had such low grades in terms of volumes of carats. The value of those carats were very high.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. So when I was working in the mine, I was, I was trying to work out, if I drove my 1-ton ute, which I was, trying to be a good bloke at the time, so I bought a ute, and if I drove my 1-ton ute underground and I filled the back up with ore, I think I calculated at the mine that I was at, it would be worth around $50 worth of gold, right?
Yeah.
But in your mine, I guess the risk isn't people taking the ore, there might be potential security around people leaving the mine with some of these super high valued diamonds. How does that kind of work out in the process?
Yeah. So interestingly, I actually worked in De Beers' richest mine as well, their highest grade mine.
Okay.
Where actually, if you were very, very lucky, you might even see a diamond in the face. And this was when it was still a large open pit mine. So yes, the risk of miners absconding with those diamonds was something that mines had to deal with. So regular searches, like everyone going into the mine, would be searched on the way out. And once again, technology came into play, because when I was working on those mines, it was X-rays. So everyone was X-rayed, or
Wow.
there was a random X-ray of people moving in and out of the mine area. Because yes, in previous decades, there were a number of ingenious ways that people smuggled diamonds out of mines.
Gosh.
Yeah.
What are we talking here?
Oh, my favorite one is in the use of homing pigeons.
Homing pigeons?
Oh, yes.
You're joking.
I am not joking.
From the open cut?
It's from open pit mines, yes.
Wow.
So, and the diamond mines in Namibia in particular.
No way.
Yeah.
That is insane. I would have never have thought that.
I wouldn't have either.
So you mentioned block caving.
Yes.
And we were fortunate enough to work in a block cave. And for people that aren't familiar with the process,
Yep.
can you maybe give us like a 2-second rundown on how wild block caving is?
Okay, great. So in conventional mining, you would drill a face or an area and remove the material laterally from that face, and you have your hanging wall. It's like taking, if we go back to that chocolate cake, a triple layered cake, it will be like taking out the middle layer, one little slice at a time, but only the middle layer. In block caving, what you're doing is you're going in underneath the cake and you're opening up an area beneath it. And instead of slicing it away, you're actually allowing it all to crumble down below you.
Wow.
So, if you ever had sand in a bucket with a hole in it and you watch the sand disappearing down the hole, that's what the top of a block cave would look like.
That's such a cool analogy. And the ore body is just in the middle of the cake. Like it's the sweet spot in the middle.
Yes.
So I guess at the bottom of they call them draw points.
Yes, the draw points.
At the bottom of the draw points, you've got this kind of amount of ore and huge amounts of rock that you've got to go through the filtering and sorting process.
Yeah. So the other major difference, of course, with conventional drilling and blasting, you can design your blasting to give you rock types of a certain range in size. But in block caving, it depends on the strength of the rock, how well it's fractured. Because you're not blasting, you don't control the size of the rocks that are coming in. And so, yes, draw points and management of draw points was a big thing in block caving.
It's such a wild process. I remember the first time I went underground at Rio, back at North Parks.
Yeah.
I was just so blown away by the scale of the whole, the project. It was just such a wild scale. And I think that can really, inspire young people to be like, wow, the technology also.
Yes.
Insane.
Yes. It was, so the thing I remembered about North Parks that I also got excited about, besides the mining technique and the fact that it was copper. So as a geologist, I'd always wanted to work in a porphyry copper deposit, and I thought I'd have to go to South America to do so. But when the opportunity came up in Australia, I jumped at it. So because I had block caving experience, but I was also a competent person for copper, so I could offer the mine a number of different expertise. But what excited me about North Parks was all the new technology that was being introduced. So Rio Tinto was using this mine to trial automation underground. And it was really exciting to be in the forefront of this process in mining, being at that mine.
I know that you kind of have jumped into some pretty tense leadership positions, and we'll come to North Parks, but we might step back a little bit because I wanted to ask you about this situation in South Africa where you've put your hand up to go and negotiate salary for miners, where just so recently there was this hostage situation underground. Like, what in the world were you thinking putting your hand up to go in and manage this situation?
When you put it that way, I have to wonder myself. No, but there were a lot of good reasons at the time. So I'd joined this Canadian mid-tier platinum miner. They, like everywhere in bush platinum, there was a unionized workforce, and there at that time there had been a lot of violence in previous salary negotiations because there were quite vast disparities in what a laborer was paid compared to, management, for example. And we're talking about a time that was still really early in South Africa's democracy. So, a bit of learning to happen in how to work through those processes. So I was part of the management team, the executive team, and I was one of the few women who was on that team. And when the HR manager said, well, we're going to approach this negotiation differently, I thought, I want to be part of that. I want to do the training with the miners to understand about negotiations. I want to understand what their issues are and how we as management can find a way to work it out. And so it was really good to go through that training process. And what helped was I stood out not only because I was a woman, because there were other female managers, but I was the professional who was going underground every day, who was talking to the drillers, who was talking to the samplers, who was going to all the different pits to look at how the sampling was happening.
Perfectly placed.
I was visiting, the sampling plant and the processing plant. People knew me because I stood out as that little Indian woman who was, curious about everything. So it helped having those relationships in place already to come from it as I am not only this ivory tower management person, I am boots on the ground with you and I understand the environment you're working in.
Jeez. I just, I think it really, the idea that resonates with me was you're almost the perfect person to have this discussion and to lead the negotiation, because you've got all these subtle relationships with all of the people that have been, doing the hard work, and you've got these relationships that you can talk to and understand. And approaching it from a place of actually understanding rather than pushing back is also, that also appeals to me.
Yeah, it was interesting because we weren't a large mining company, but we were expected to match what the big miners were offering. And so we had to find a way to do that was financially feasible for the mine. So it wasn't only about the money, it was about what else could we do in terms of work conditions to come to an agreement with the miners. And I'm pleased to say, we ironed out a 3-year agreement with no hostility and a lot more mutual respect for people. The HR manager did say that having a woman in the room meant that everyone was on their best behavior. So, women have their strengths.
Yeah, I can 100% agree on that. And you mentioned some of the violence that had happened previously, because I think you'd mentioned at the beginning, you said you were really starting out in geology in a time when it was illegal for women to be working underground in South Africa.
Yeah.
But I guess later on in time, times were changing a little bit. What was the kind of situation at that point in time?
Yeah. So the law was repealed in 1992, I think, for women to work underground. And I started underground in 94 full time. But because there were so few women and it was still unheard of for women to work underground, there were absolutely no facilities for women underground. People didn't know how to deal with having a woman in the workplace there. There were no change rooms. There were no PPE for women. It was really important to to be aware of the dangers as well, because, young women, the only one on the mine, was a target, not just for snide comments or disbelief that you could actually add value, but also, potentially racial discrimination and sexual violence. And that was something that mining had to deal with and learn to adjust to and ensure that it wasn't happening. And I'm pleased to say, it has come a long way. Those conditions are very rare these days. Mines have, behaviors have changed, attitudes have changed, and more importantly, systems and the infrastructure has changed to make sure that women can equally contribute to mining.
That's a very interesting point, and it kind of does lead us into you coming to Australia and working in Australian mining. And I was kind of wondering the kind of differences that you were in these super high stress, high stakes environments in South Africa, and then you've come to Australia and you're leading a technical services team. You don't have any resources. The project's coming to wrapping up. Like, how are you finding the comparison between working in South Africa to working in Australia at the time? I mean, Australia is always, we're proud of the cultures that we have, but what was it like compared to the South African culture?
So it was a bit of a surprise. I'd expected it to be very similar, and certainly in terms of, mining methods and the roles that people had, those were all similar. But the difference in culture that stood out for me was in the relationships between management and workers. I'd explained to you about the quite hostile ones in South Africa, but that was, earlier days. Things had moved on, and industrial relations was actually really good in South Africa when I moved to Australia. And I found that it wasn't as good in Australia. I was a bit taken aback by that work conditions were actually not as good, or that mine workers didn't have similar levels of...
Like rights.
Yes, rights in a way. So the way things functioned seemed to me a bit outdated.
Really?
And unfortunately, it's changed as well. The world's moving along. So that was interesting. But I guess at the same time, what stood out, what was good, was the broad diversity of cultures at North Parks in particular. I think Rio Tinto, whom I'd moved with, were doing a great job in terms of getting broader diversity into their workforce and recognizing how to support that.
So, I mean, you were stepping through leadership positions, and you came to North Parks as one of the leaders.
Yep.
What does that mean to you? Like, what does it mean to you to lead a team? Because I think it's a strand that runs through your entire career of this, like, kind of learning from the ground and learning from the boots on the ground.
Yes. So it's really important for me as a leader to understand, the roles, the work that my team's doing, and to ensure that they are supported in that they have, the tools, the programs, the equipment, the PPE. But probably most importantly, they understand what their contribution is, that they're aligned to whatever our vision is, or a mission, purpose for that particular team or division or organization as a whole. So as a leader, my job was not only in ensuring that they could keep themselves safe in the conditions that they were working in, but also to ensure that they were adequately resourced to do the work that they do. And also, and I guess this is a part of leadership that people may not always want to face up to, be responsible for making sure people are working together in a way that is respectful, because there's always going to be issues, differences of opinion. You have to manage the people and the relationships.
Yeah. I think so many people just, you know, you could hope that things are going to get better, you know, and I think it takes a really particular type of person to take accountability for things, especially when there's differences of opinion. And, you know, often at work, it's your job to have your opinion,
Yes.
you know, and it's their job to have, you know, you've got these two differences of opinion, but that's actually you doing your job well,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So it's not like a you're not kind of pushing up against each other, or it's not like a personality thing.
Yeah.
It's actually just people just doing their job.
It is. But what's important that there is a culture in which it can happen respectfully.
Completely.
Because so often people are allowing poor behavior to continue.
Yeah, how good. That's such a good experience. Okay, I wanted to ask you another personal question.
Yeah.
I know towards the tail end of your experience there as the technical services manager, you know, you've been brought in to manage projects that were kind of winding down and you were kind of leading through some quite challenging economic time. And the question that I had for you is, when is the right time to walk and when is the right time to keep going? And like, how do you make that decision? Because, you know, I think often we're at these crossroads where we're like, gosh, this is tough, man. Like, this is really hard, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, you might be struggling to find the energy to come to work every day.
Yes.
Where do you get the courage to just keep going, or when do you call it and pull the pin?
Yeah. I think it is very much dependent on the person and the situation. For myself, at that point, I was, as you said, we were under-resourced. There were a lot of requirements, projects on the go, initiatives, and I was literally doing 3 roles in terms of being the competent person, reporting on resources and reserves. I was the technical services manager responsible for the day-to-day underground support, but also all of the major projects. And then I was the project manager for the biggest project, which was having to be completed. And I found that I was really keen to do it all, and I wanted to do it all really well. But I also realized I was burning out. And I thought, I'm going to finish this project and wrap it up. And it was an amazing achievement to, within 1 year, go from an order of magnitude study on a new mining block, which was the E26 sublevel cave. So it was also a new mining method for the mine. And to go from, you know, having a geological model to having the full mine design presented to the board, and they gave the go-ahead for the mining to start. That was a huge achievement. And I thought, okay, that's it. I'm happy. I can stop now and take care of myself. I'd gone as far as I could go.
So it was about finishing the job.
For me, it was about finishing the job, but also realizing I needed to stop.
Yeah, you need to give yourself a bit of a leeway after that to kind of recover. And
I did. So I resigned, which was, you know, it felt like, or it could have felt like I was giving up, but I actually knew I was backing myself when I resigned.
That's such a good way to think about it.
Because it was in the middle of a downturn, and it's like, why are you crazy? Are you leaving your job? Like, no, I have to leave my job because I have to take care of my health now. I have to take care of me, not the mine anymore.
So this is in GFC time, I'm thinking.
Well, actually, this was after GFC. So there is a GFC story as well, but that was a redundancy. That was not voluntary.
Oh, wow.
But no, you know, it was understanding that taking care of yourself is important. And are you prepared to do it, you know, to back yourself? And I was. But it also, that stop for me was useful because I'd been in mining close to 20 years at that point, and I had been thinking about, well, what do I want to do next? So I used the break to actually conceive of where am I going to pivot to in my career. And I focused in on the fact that I really liked the technology.
Okay.
So I was looking for various jobs, and the technology partner role in BHP came up, and I thought, I'm going for that. I have this technology background. I'm keen. I'm good with people. I think I'll be a good fit. And, you know, they thought so too. So that took me from, you know, Parkes in New South Wales to Perth.
Wow.
in a few months, and
And you're
a whole
rolling
new
out
chapter.
rolling out technology across, I'm imagining multiple projects and
Yes.
huge portfolio.
Yep. So initially it was about technology and innovation and working with startups and engineering companies and research institutions to find new ways of addressing the problems.
Gosh, so exciting.
It was awesome. And then I was the technology partner for Western Australian iron ore, some of the mines there, including the flagship technology mine, Eastern Ridge, which was just awesome, where BHP was putting in the latest technology. And I was also responsible for something called non-process infrastructure, which was camps and aviation and the township water and energy supply. So I got insights into what were the technology needs of all of these different things, like booking systems for flights and accommodation, through to monitoring of the gas turbines for energy.
Wow.
And, water supply. So it was great. I was doing exactly what I wanted to do in terms of expanding my world of understanding in mining.
That's insane. What a great range of projects
It
to
was.
be
Yes.
to be responsible for.
Yes.
I want to take you back because you did mention redundancy, and I know,
Yes.
I know it could be a sticking point for a lot of people, especially in uncertain economic times.
Yeah.
How did you deal with that?
Yeah. Well, the first time was 5 years into my career. I'd been working in exploration, and Gencore, the company, Gencore Billiton, was taken over by BHP, and exploration was cut, by 80%.
Wow.
And I was in that 80%. But, I was young, I was resilient. I thought, no, that's, it's not all doom and gloom. Instead of taking my redundancy package, I asked them, well, actually, could you still pay for this conference I want to attend? Because I'd been booked to go to a conference which was focused on what I was going to be doing my master's topic on, which was Mississippi Valley type lead zinc deposits.
So techie.
Very techie, very nerdy. So yes, I didn't take the redundancy package, but they agreed to fund me to go to the conference in London and to do the field trip. And the field trip was really important to me because that's where I was going to visit all these mines and gather more data. So that was the first time around. And it was fine because I got my information that I needed for my master's out of it. And
of course.
a few months later, I found a job in De Beers.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Worked out so well for you.
It did. The second time round, though, was the GFC. So it was with the Canadian mid-tier company. And this one hit me hard because I'd been going through, as a manager, restructuring the organization or the departments that I was responsible for, letting people go, which was really hard. And a week later, I was told, we also are getting rid of you.
Goodness.
And it's like, oh my goodness. It was, the worst possible time. It's the GFC. There's not a lot of roles out there.
I just imagine you reading the list of names and then just at the bottom's your name.
It was not good. I did not, Gencore Billiton had managed the retrenchment process really well with a lot of support.
It must have been, how do you recover from that?
It was a shock, and I guess I wasn't as mentally prepared for it as I had been, with the previous redundancy. But I just had to get on with finding the next role, really.
How long did it take you after that?
It was about 3 months because there wasn't much going on in the mining sector. Well, in mines at the time, everyone was making people redundant. So I found a role in consulting.
Okay.
Which, it was great in terms of being able to offer me something. And it was a company I'd actually spoken to years before. I've always admired what they do. So when I was made redundant, they were one of the first companies I approached and said, well, look, I have all of these experiences and expertise to offer. What do you think? And they said, well, yeah, we can take you on as a
Oh, that's great.
consultant. And it was, as I said, I was a competent person for reporting off various commodities, and I had all of this different mining method experience. And that love of working with people meant that I got to do some new things in the consulting business, including doing programs like geology for non-geologists. I presented training. It's like, oh, interesting.
How good.
It was.
How exciting.
And really importantly, in that time that I worked with a consulting company, I was in touch with consultants all over the world, and I heard about women in mining Western Australia. And I thought, we need something like that in South Africa. So I decided to start Women in Mining South Africa.
Wow.
And it was, the consulting company were really supportive in that. It was recognized as being part of the networking that I could do in my role, and to, amplify the visibility of the organization. So that's how Women in Mining was born in 2010 in South Africa. There was a real need for it because the South African government had set targets to attract women in mining. At the time, we were, I think it was about 6% or so of professional, women in mining. And the overall numbers were very low, like about 10%. And the target was, I can't remember what the target is now, but there was a target that meant having a significant uplift. And I recognized the problem was women, didn't want to work in mining. They didn't understand what mining was. They didn't have role models in mining. So having an organization that could provide all of that support was important. And that's how Women in Mining, WIMSA, started.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So you've started this Women in Mining group.
Yes.
And started off, I'd imagine it would have started off quite small.
Yes.
And then as mining kind of became more appealing to women, it would have grown and grown. What's Women in Mining in South Africa like these days?
It's more than 5,000 members. It is well supported by industry. And most importantly, it has a mentoring program for women that has been really successful. Now, mentoring is something I've always been passionate about. Having someone who's been there and done that and can guide you through the process is really useful. So WIMSA is doing really well at the moment. I'm very proud looking back at being the founder of it, to see where it is now and to still be in touch with the women who are part of that organizing committee or the board, or who are mentors.
Wow. What an incredible feeling it must be, looking at the group and just seeing where it's all gotten to and just thinking, wow, it was just a thought bubble one day, and now look at it, 5,000 people. It must feel incredible.
And what was really great, it was bringing together a bunch of volunteers in that first year and going and talking to different companies about hosting events and sponsoring and building it a little bit at a time.
Gosh.
But getting to where it is now. Yep.
That's you've always been like a really big advocate for getting more women into kind of STEM areas. I know.
Absolutely.
You've been getting more involved in the Women in Nuclear.
Yes.
Where did that all come about? And actually, maybe we should just step back to the fact that, so you're someone who's had a whole bunch of this mining experience and technical experience, and then where does the thought bubble just come, hey, I want to get into nuclear? And I'm sorry, but who are you to think you can just go and lead a nuclear reactor?
Yeah.
Where does that come from?
Oh, I would say it was good preparation and good luck in timing. So the preparation part I spoke to you about already. In my mind, I was planning on broadening my career horizons after 20 years in mining. So I'd moved into technology, and after that I was looking at acquiring skills that were transferable to other industries. So it was very deliberate. So after BHP Technology, I worked for South 32 in business improvement. And while I was with them, I was approached about this role in ANSTO, Australia's Nuclear Science and Technology Organisation. And I was asked, would you be interested in running Australia's reactor? And my first thought was like, oh, is this a joke? What do I know about reactors?
I can only imagine.
And then I figured out, no, this was serious.
Wow.
They genuinely wanted to know, would I be interested in taking over the operations of Australia's only nuclear reactor? And I said, yes, of course. Because, why not? As a nerd,
What amazing experience.
I love everything about science and technology. And to be able to work in nuclear, I'd never expected I would get that opportunity because I have no nuclear background. The closest I'd come to a nuclear reactor was actually living next to one in South Africa. South Africa's research reactor was in my neighborhood. But also as a geologist, sending samples for neutron activation. That was my interaction with research reactors. But they were looking for someone with an operational background at an executive level. And I could offer that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible. What a great shift,
Yeah.
And I think it really shows how versatile like all of our careers are, not just engineering, but science too.
Yes.
But the question I have for you is often when we come into these situations, you've talked about learning and you've talked about being in touch with the people and the boots on the ground.
Yeah.
But when you're still learning yourself, how do you still maintain that level of credibility and leadership over the team when people could be wondering, this person has only worked in nuclear for a couple of days and she's learning, like how do you kind of manage that kind of feeling and how do you manage yourself through that situation where you're just learning yourself?
Yeah. So firstly, the part I was learning about was nuclear. I'd already come with a lot of the skills that was needed for being an executive in that role. So people often talk about transferable skills and maybe wonder what those are. But leadership, for example, is a transferable skill, regardless of which sector you're in. The qualities of a leader and the duties of a leader are very similar. I brought this leadership background in terms of understanding how to manage people, how to inspire them to work towards objectives and how to develop them in their roles as well. I brought an understanding of stakeholder engagement in difficult situations. Mining has a lot of detractors. Nuclear had even more in Australia. So understanding how to deal with communities, with regulators, with the government, with industry was already part of my skill set. Another aspect was communications. So even though I am a somewhat shy person, when it comes to large groups, I really do not like talking to large groups. I still get nervous. One-on-one, I am much more comfortable. So I understood how to communicate with people. Having brought all of that mentoring experience, it all worked in the nuclear environment as well. And the best part was, with my background in mining and wandering around plants all over the place, I understood what the pieces of kit were in the reactor. Yes, I had to learn how the reactor itself worked, but everything else around it was not that dissimilar from any other industrial piece of equipment. So I came with this baseline of knowledge that I could go and talk to the technicians on the ground. I could talk to the nuclear engineers. I could talk to the mechanical engineers and the electrical engineers because what they did was not very dissimilar from the teams I'd managed previously.
Gosh, and all the skills that you've learned throughout these, from the early building blocks when you're doing geology back in the day.
Yes. So
incredible.
Yeah.
So since I spoke to you last, I've gone and had a look at the OPAL, you called it. I didn't know what OPAL was.
Oh, yes.
But Tell us what it's like to
Mm-hmm.
look into the OPAL reactor. Explain it for people that just haven't got a clue of what it's like.
Okay. So OPAL stands for the Open Pool Australian Light Water Reactor. And yes, the name's deliberate because it is a Australian icon and it's very visible to the rest of the world. It stands out not only because it is beautiful, it is literally beautiful when you peer in. If you can imagine, I guess the closest analogy would be a round swimming pool made out of stainless steel. But there's 13 meters between you and the bottom, which is the core of the reactor. And when the reactor's running, it is glowing this beautiful, eerie light blue. It's called the Cherenkov glow.
Wow.
When neutrons are moving faster than the speed of light and interacting with water. It is just, I can't say it's out of this world because it's very much in this world, but as someone who is a science fiction fan, I never expected to see anything like that in my lifetime.
It's like the building blocks of physics.
Yes, and to be able to see it in action. So I had the privilege of taking, VIP visitors to look at OPAL and to peer casually over the side of the pool as you do.
So just wait 1 second, because
Yep.
when I imagine a nuclear reactor,
Yes.
I imagine massive concrete shields, but it's
Yes.
not like that.
No, this is a research reactor which is designed to allow for material to be put in and out of the reflector vessel, which is the area that contains the core. And it is operating at a really low thermal energy, only 20 megawatts. Because what we are after is a neutron flux. It's the neutrons that are interesting in a research reactor. Very different from the design of power reactors, which are entirely contained. And they contain because they're having to generate really high thermal energy, which is then used to, boil water or is conducted through to run turbines and produce electricity. So self-contained, you cannot go into and peer into the innards of a power reactor unless it's shut down. Whereas in research reactors, which are open pool, you can. There are research reactors which are not open pool types, the earlier reactors. But open pool reactors allow far more flexibility in utilization. And OPAL's recognized as one of the most efficient research reactors in the world for its utilization.
That's insane. And I actually did look up and saw a photo of it yesterday on the train on the way home, and I was like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow, she is not kidding. It is beautiful.
Yeah.
And for, I've heard quite a lot about the OPAL reactor, because one thing I was always interested in is I heard that they do open days.
Yes.
I was like, for all the geeks out there, this is cool. Like, you could actually go, can you have a look at the reactor on the open day?
So you can't actually get into pool top. That's reserved for VIPs.
Okay. So they've got to hit you up.
But you can get into the observation room next to the control room. So you're at the same level as the reactor. You can you can see through the windows what the team's doing in terms of loading the core or loading nuclear medicine target plates into the reactor. And the video screens will show you the cameras that are over the pool, so you get to see what it is like inside.
So for all the geeks out there, that's probably that would be a great day out.
Yeah, it is.
And I always wondered, kind of, what are we doing out of these research reactors?
So in Australia, we're focused very much on producing nuclear medicine for Australia and our region. Mm-hmm. And reactor-based nuclear medicine is something that is used worldwide, but there are only 5 other research reactors, including and OPAL,
around the world,
that are producing reactor-based nuclear medicine.
Wow.
So we have to work at an international level to ensure that there's supply, which is why we worked through COVID. We were an essential service.
Wow.
And there's a whole international supply chain piece to it that we need to manage as well.
Because I guess if the reactor stops, then this medicine's not provided.
It's not, and you would have to source it from one of the other 5 reactors elsewhere in the world. So nuclear medicine is one, and then the neutrons for research is huge. That was why OPAL was built, to enable irradiation of different targets. So not only nuclear medicine targets, but targets to understand structure of materials, for example. So material science is one of the key areas. The beam lines are used to look at aspects for human health. So looking at both organic and inorganic matter. The applications are limitless, I would say, because, human health, environmental research, materials research, physics and radiation research. Australia is really fortunate to have a reactor that researchers can apply to use, beam time or to have materials irradiated. And then there's a commercial aspect as well. It is used to irradiate silicon. So it's called neutron transmutation doping. And what it does is it changes the structure of silicon metal to become one of the best semiconductors that's used in heavy industry, in high-speed bullet trains or wind turbines.
Wow.
Yeah.
Insane.
Yeah. So, when you think about magic and alchemy, oh, you can do that with a reactor.
You're pretty close if you work at
Pretty
the
close,
sites.
yeah.
Oh, that's incredible. I mean, what a great experience that is to kind of, be an executive and
Yes.
be on the board. And I know that you've worked on the board for many different kind of ASX listed companies and other companies. How does that all come about? Like, how do you, through all your experiences, how do you find these new roles, and how do you get involved with all these companies on boards, and how do you do that?
The how is because I'm curious about everything and I want to give it a go. But also because I have been learning, So it started with that level of board governance and understanding what was needed in terms of governing an organization. It started when I was a vice president of the Geological Society of South Africa. And one of the things I did in one of my portfolios was actually revise and upgrade the constitution of the GSSA to bring it to a modern constitution, and then take it to the membership who had to vote on this change. And I did that as a vice president, and it got across, it was approved. And, the next year I was actually the president of the Geological Society of South Africa, which I was really proud to be.
What an amazing achievement.
It was something I would never have aspired to if I hadn't seen that there'd been a previous female president when I was an undergrad at university. So she inspired me to become a president of the Geological Society. And I was one of the youngest, and I think only the second or third female president. So having that background gave me the confidence to start Women in Nuclear. But also when I arrived in Australia, to put my hand up for the AusIMM board.
Oh, of course, yeah, AusIMM.
AusIMM, yes. So AusIMM was a much bigger organization because it wasn't only geologists, it was mining and engineers and metallurgists as well. And I was told, most people don't actually get to be nominated their first go around because it is a vote by members. And, here I was, newly arrived in the country. Who was I to think they could get into the AusIMM board? But I had been, I joined the Geoscience Society here. I was, chairing that committee. I was contributing to the profession, and people knew me and knew I could do the job. So I think that's why they voted me in. So I became a director of AusIMM. And when I was appointed to the board, I realized, well, I actually need to understand more about governance in Australia. So I did the company directors course.
Yeah, okay.
And that has set me up for all the other board work that I've done. I'm also a director of a company called Exige, which is a startup between myself and my husband, focused on geophysics, but not specifically on using very light aircraft like drones for conducting airborne geophysical surveys.
So exploration geophysics.
Exploration geophysics.
Oh my goodness.
And
using drones.
Using drones, but it's also applicable to agriculture, to archaeology, wherever you're conducting a small survey that needs geosensing, you could use these drones. So what excited me about it was, once again, it was about technology development, because, sensors exist for normal helicopters or fixed wing planes.
Yeah.
They had to be developed for drones.
To be super light so they could actually be lifted.
Yeah, yeah. And then all of the work that was happening, in developing and promoting this was, and also an interesting challenge for myself to be involved
I swear
in.
you've just followed the stuff you're interested in and had a crack.
Oh, yes. I mean, where's the point of doing something you don't enjoy, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I know a lot of people chase money. It's like you've just chased your
interest.
Oh, what's this? I might go and do this for a little while.
Yes.
Hey, unfortunately, we're coming to the end of the episode. And I wanted to ask you one last question, which was for people that might be maybe doubting their current place or maybe doubting their ability. You've been through so many situations where you've kind of fully backed yourself. Have you got any advice for people that are maybe going through a tough time and maybe they're not feeling quite made up for the work that they're doing, or maybe they're not feeling like they're 100% ready?
Yes. Okay, so a couple of things. That feeling of not being ready is never going to go away because it's inside of you. So you've just got to get on with it, for starters. And then secondly, yes, there are things you won't know, but you have the opportunity to learn. And people are very willing to teach. I think we underestimate the level of generosity of colleagues and others when it comes to when you're in a new role, getting up to speed. I learned so much from all of the staff at OPAL and more broadly in ANSTO in their specific areas. And they were generous enough to teach me. When I asked questions, they didn't just send me away. So, that learning on the job is an opportunity. And, the self-doubt is always going to be there. But you've got to ask yourself, who do you want to be? That doubter or that person who believes in themselves? And I hope, that the one will outweigh the other more often.
Well, certainly in my mind, they're at a constant war with each other.
Yes. Yes.
Pamela, it's been such an amazing conversation with you. We've heard from your experience through geology and then through getting further into leadership and your moves around the world and your complete changes of scene and moving into new industries. I think I was so happy to hear your story over the past little while. And I know that all of our listeners are going to be so pumped to have this conversation that they can listen to and just be a part of. It's so great to have you on the show. I do have a gift for you. The traditional Full Send Engineering t-shirt. That's for you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Matt. It
No
has
worries.
been an absolute pleasure to chat with you and to share my story. I think, having had the opportunity to pivot so many times in my career has made me appreciate that you may not always know where the next opportunity will come from, but you are in control of how prepared you are to take it.
What amazing advice, Pamela.
Thank you.
It's so great to have you on the show. And if you like hearing these kind of stories online, please like, comment and subscribe. Leave some feedback, tell us what we're doing good, tell us what we're doing bad. I love being able to bring these stories, into the public. And I think it takes courage to come on the show and talk. So Pamela, it's been such a great conversation. Thanks for coming on Full Send Engineering.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Thanks.